didn't thought I was going to get picked. I never get picked. Anyway, the day I met Juan, we were in a park, and he was skinny and in good shape, and he was beautiful, and he had squinty little eyes. He had sneakers, which are hard to come by where I came from. And I come from Bogota, Colombia, a strange city in a strange country, all the way south, over there. And I was smoking a cigarette, and he came up to me and he said, "You can have a light." And I said, "Sure." So I lighted his cigarette and I cased it because it was windy. And he said, "Good casing. You grew up by the sea." And I said, "Yeah, I did." So he lit up his cigarette. He took a big drag, like long. He was like impressed because I was 12. He was like going all the way to the half. The ash was hanging, and then he took it away like this, like James Dean and shit. And he proceeded to turn it off on my arm. Somewhere around here, I have a scar somewhere. It's going away. But he did it, and I was like, "What the fuck, shit?" And like, then it was a brawl. We were fighting. I was holding him, and he was pushing me, and then all of a sudden he couldn't put me down, and I was looking at him, and I said, "Why? Why did you attack me?" And he said, "I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if you handled yourself, if you could handle yourself." And I was like, "Sorry, man, like, is that a bad thing?" And he said, "Yeah, I can always tell." And that's why he was the scariest guy in the neighborhood, because he could tell everything about everybody. And he liked me because he couldn't tell. So we rolled together. And then we lived in it was like a 300-acre kind of area where they built like 5,000 houses that were like all exactly the same. And then you met somebody, and then you went in there and you were like, "Wow, this is exactly like my house." And he could tell the orientation of people's houses. And he would be walking, he would be like, "Sunsetter." And I would be like, "What?" He was like, "His house faces to where the sun sets. I can tell." And I thought that was beautiful. But he saw vulnerabilities in that. He said he could figure out how to beat up somebody depending on the orientation of their houses. Which made him one of the toughest people in the neighborhood, and a good friend to have. Because it was a tough neighborhood, gotta say. And but it was very poetic most of the time, until you were like beating somebody up and you were bleeding and cops would come, and it was just very confusing. He was a very aggressive guy. And then one day I was walking by myself, because I was always with one. Because you had to be with one in my neighborhood. And I was walking by myself with this other little kid who was like the pet mascot kind of guy, somebody's sister or something, somebody's little brother or something like that. And we got beat up. And months later, we were hanging out in this like street carnival kind of thing, and the guy that beat us up walked by, all by himself, over there. And I made the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. I told one. And I said, "Hey, remember that day that I got beat up with the little kid?" And that was the guy. And so he said, "Let's pick him up." And he had a friend that I've never met before, and I've known one since I was 4 years old. And now I was like 16 or something. And I've never met this other guy that he was like, "We need this guy." "Who's this guy?" "Fabio." And before I said anything, he said, "No jokes, his name is Fabio. Don't say anything." Just trust me. And he never said, there was never copied with him. Anyway, we picked up the guy, and Juan used to drive this little Jeep Willys that had like a little gas tank at the end. And we unloaded the tank, and we got the guy, and they tied him up to a tree, and we put some gas in him. And then he got some matches, and I was kind of like trying to convince him not to do it. And he threw the first match, and it fell on his chest, and he was too wet. And I said, "Juan, I need to talk to you over here by yourself." I appreciate the sentiment. I'm flattered. We gotta let this guy. This is not possible. We're not gonna burn this guy up, and I'm not gonna let you do that. And he said, "Okay, so if you walk away, you're going to have to get better grades or I'm going to kill you. And then I got a grant to come to school in the United States of America. I went to art school, and he married my sister.